Hey guys, what's up? It's Austin and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be reviewing the newest edition of the microfiber velvet sponge family. This is the Rosé sponge. It's supposed to be 30% softer than the original sponge. Also did a full review video on the original microfiber velvet sponge, so if you would like to check that out, it'll be linked right here in the eye. It'll be a little drop down right here. The new Rosé sponge is claimed to be 30% softer than the original sponge, so today I'm going to be putting that to the test. I'm going to be doing the right side of my face with the new Rosé sponge, and I'm going to be doing the left side of my face with the original microfiber sponge, and seeing how they compare and contrast. So if you'd like to see these two sponges go head to head and see which one works best, just keep on watching. Just like in my original microfiber velvet sponge review, I'm going to be using a damp sponge to blend out any of my cream products, so foundations, concealers, and any cream contouring, although I'm not going to be cream contouring today, but you can use this for cream contouring. And then I'm going to be using a dry sponge to blend out any bronzers, blushes, and highlighters. So all of my powder products I'll be using with a dry sponge. Before diving into the sponges, I'm going to be just reading the description on the back of the new Rosé packaging. Seamless results every time. Achieve the ultimate in foundation coverage with this makeup brush and blender fusion sponge. Save 50% more makeup product and spend 50% less time applying with our innovative design, perfect for blending in all formulas. So right off the bat, I definitely noticed that the Rosé sponge has a little more bounce back to the sponge rather than the original microfiber sponge. Again, the Rosé sponge is supposed to be 30% softer than the original sponge, so I'm definitely feeling that with the bounce back of the sponge. But as far as like the actual fibers on the sponge, they actually feel the same. I'm starting off with a little bit of my Tatcha Silk Canvas Primer. I'm just going to be putting a little bit of this on the face just to even everything out. For foundation today, I'm going to be using the e.l.f. Flawless Finish Foundation, and I'm in the shade Alabaster. I find that dotting your foundation all over your face before blending it out with a sponge really helps to keep it even and less cakey in certain areas. So I'm going to go ahead and blend out the left side of my face with the original Juno & Co. Velvet Sponge. And personally, I like to use the butt end of the sponge to blend out my foundations. Now that is the left side of my face all blended out with the original microfiber velvet sponge. You guys know that this is my favorite sponge, and as usual, it blended out everything flawlessly. Now let's move over to the right side and the Rosé sponge and see how everything blends out. So again, I'm just going in with another pump of foundation. I'm going to be dotting this all over the face. And I'm just going to be blending that out with the butt end of the sponge. Now the sponge definitely does feel a lot softer on the skin when you're bouncing the product in to your skin.
This is an urgent message for the vehicle owner. We have been trying to reach you about your car's extended warranty. You should have received something in the mail about your car's
Does anyone else get these phone calls about your extended warranty of your car, or your health insurance is currently da-da-da-da-da? Bitch, no, it's a scam. Run away. Anyway, back to the sponge. I'm not really sure what the original motive was as far as creating a softer sponge. Personally, I never had any problems out of the original microfiber velvet sponge. Now, I do know that some people were complaining about, you know, it lifting up products when they were layering them, etc., etc. However, honestly, I've never had that problem happen to me. This is definitely my favorite sponge. It blends out everything smoothly. It doesn't soak up any of the products inside the actual sponge. So yeah, it also was never advertised as far as why they decided to create a softer sponge. But hey, it's here. We got it, and we're testing it out to see what it's all about. Just going to be going in with my e.l.f. Camo Concealer now that we have that foundation all blended out. And the shade that I'm using is Medium Peach. I'm going to go ahead and do the left side of my face first, and then we'll do the right side. And when I blend out concealers, I personally like to use the round edge of the sponge to really get in and blend out that concealer, especially in the inner corner as well. Alright, now that we have the left side of my face all done, I'm going to be going in with the same concealer and doing the right side of my face. And again, I'm going to be blending out the concealer with the rounded side of the sponge. Now after blending out my concealer, I definitely noticed a difference between these two sponges. The Rosé sponge has a little bit more of a pointed edge than the regular microfiber velvet sponge. This one is a little more rounded, and this one is a little more pointy. Hope you can kind of see that on my forehead there. I found that it was a lot easier to blend out the concealer, especially on the inner portion of the eye, where the eye creases in the inner corner right there. A lot of the times I have a little bit of problems blending it out with the right side of the sponge. I usually just go in with my ring finger and pat it out under there. However, I didn't have to do that with this sponge. So I definitely like the more of a pointed edge on the Rosé sponge rather than the original microfiber velvet sponge. Now that's all of the cream products that I'm going to be using today, so I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my dry sponges. Just like I was talking about before, you can see how the original microfiber sponge is a little more rounded at the top, and the Rosé sponge is definitely more precise. And now it's time to set all of those cream products in place. So I'm going to be using the translucent setting powder from Pretty Vulgar, and of course my dry sponges. So when blending out dry products, I love to use this flat edge right here. So what I'm going to be doing is just dipping that in a little bit. Just dipping that in a little bit, get it nice and coated. And then I'm going back in with my damp sponge and blending out any of those creases underneath the eyes, because again, we don't want to set any creases. We want to set a flat surface, so it'll stay a flat surface. Now I'm just going over to the Rosé side of the face. Of course, I'm going in with my damp sponge and blending out those creases underneath the eye. Just going in with my Rosé side again with the flat edge of the sponge, dipping it into my powder. I like to just start underneath the eye, and then I go right on the side of the nose. Then I bring that down onto the cheeks, and then just right over the lip, and then back down to the chin, just like we did on the other side. I like to really push all of that powder into the skin and really set that makeup for all day wear. Now I have oily skin, so that's why I'm setting the entire face. So if you have dry skin, it may not be necessary to set the whole face. However, this is a crucial step in my makeup routine. Otherwise, this makeup is not gonna last very long. Especially in the Texas heat, girl, no ma'am. Now I'm just going back in with a little powder brush just to wipe away any of that excess powder. And now it's time to sculpt off the face, so I'm going to be going in with the e.l.f. bronzing palette, and I'm going to be using this shade right here as a bronzer. To blend out any powder bronzers, I like to use the round edge of the dry sponge, so I'm just going to be dipping into that a little bit and coating it evenly, and that is what the sponge is going to look like. I also like to dab a little bit of it off on my hand, just to make sure that you don't get an excessive amount of product, and then you have a mess all over your face. No one wants a mess all over your face, sorry about it. And as you can see, I'm just using stippling motions to blend this out. Honestly, when I'm using a sponge, I always use stippling motions, regardless of if it is with a damp sponge or a dry sponge. I just feel like, you know, when you're doing swiping motions, it has the potential to lift up any product underneath, and that is not what I want to do at all. Getting a little bit more product, tapping it off on my hand, and just going in on the forehead. And if you go in a little too heavy-handed, you can always just flip over to the side that we powdered our face with and just keep blending everything out. Next, I'm going to be going in with this matte shade right here. And again, on the same side that we used the bronzer on, just going to tap a little bit off as well. And I'm going to be chiseling out the cheekbones. So what I like to do is I like to take the point of the sponge, you see the little point? I like to put it right above the tragus and right underneath the ear. If you put your finger right there, you will definitely feel like an indent of where your tragus is and then your ear. So what you want to do is you'll put the point end of the sponge right in that indent, pinch it just a little bit, and just carve on down. Just like that, and that'll give you the effect of your lifted cheekbones. Then you'll just keep blending that out into your bronzer. And again, if you go a little bit too harsh, you can always flip over to the powdered side. Just blend everything out. Now I'm just taking a little bit of that deeper shade and just placing it right up into the hairline, just to give that nice gradient effect of like the lightness of the concealer, then the bronzer, and then the deepness of the contour, and then your hairline. So just making a seamless gradient all the way out, if that makes sense. Alright, now that we have the contour and the bronzer laid down, it's time to go in with a little bit of blush. So for that, I'm going to be picking up my Morphe blush palette. This is the Cool Pro palette. I'm going to be taking this light shade right here called Sexy. I'm going to be using the same rounded side that we used for our contour and our bronzer. I'm going to be picking up a little bit of that shade. Just like all of our powder products before, I'm going to be tapping that off a little bit on the hand, just so I don't get all of that pigment on the face. So now that we have that blush on there, I'm just going to go in and pat it right over our contour and bronzer that we have already laid down. Smile a little bit, get it on the apples of the cheeks. Now if you noticed, I used all of the powder face products on one side of the sponge. So I started off with bronzer, which is our lightest shade. Then I went in with contour, which will be our darkest shade. And then we went in with blush, and that just helps blend everything seamlessly together. And that way you still have some of the pigment from your bronzer and your contour, and it'll just help your blush to mix into both of those as well. So that's why I used all of the powder face products on one side of the sponge. And if you blended your powder products a little bit down too far, you can always go in with a little bit of translucent powder and just really cut that out, right like that. I'm just going to go back in with that powder brush, just clean that up. And now that we have everything blended out on the left side of the face, I'm going to be going back in with my Rosé sponge and doing the exact same thing on the right side of my face. Alright, that is both sides all blended out with bronzer, contour, and blush. Personally, I feel like both sides blended out everything exactly the same. The only thing I will say is that blending out your powder products with a sponge takes a lot longer than blending out your products with a brush. That is the only downside that I see here when blending out your products with a sponge like this. However, if you do have the extra time, I definitely love how everything blended out. Everything blended out seamlessly and very nice. However, could I achieve this with a brush? Absolutely. I definitely could achieve this with a brush in a lot faster time. Next, I'm going to go in with a little bit of the e.l.f. Matte Magic Setting Spray. I'm going to set all these powders in place. Just a little Mountain Dew Baja Blast moment. I'm so glad that they started selling these in stores. I literally used to go to Taco Bell probably 4 times a week just to get a Baja Blast. And now I can buy them in stores, so I literally bought 3 12 packs of Baja Blast. Do I need that many? Absolutely not. Am I going to drink them all? Absolutely. And last but not least, we're going to be going in with highlighter. Today I'm going to be using the shade Glaze Donut. This is a Nikki Tutorials Ofra collab. This is definitely one of my favorite highlighters of all time. Now I know it does say that you should blend out your powder products with a dry sponge. However, it makes more sense to me to blend out your highlighter with a damp sponge, as if you were wetting your brush to intensify your highlight. So what I'm going to be doing is taking just the tip of the sponge, dipping it into that highlighter. I'm going to apply this to the high points of the face. I'm just lightly stippling this in, just to control the amount of pigmentation that we get out of this highlighter. Oh, bitch. Wow. That definitely worked out beautifully on the cheekbone. I'm going to take the excess product up on the brow bone a little bit and blend it out. Just going to take a little bit of that on the nose a little bit. On the left cupid's bow, because remember, we still got to do the other side. I actually really love how the damp sponge blended that out on the skin. Now let's go over to the Rosé side. I'm going to be doing the same thing. Just picking up a little bit of that highlighter on the tip of the sponge. And now I'm just applying that to the high points of the face. And just like I said before, using a damp sponge to blend out your highlight just helps everything mesh together very nicely. That way you don't have like a strip of highlighter. Sometimes that can happen even with your brushes as well. So I find that blending your highlight out with a damp sponge really helps to push that highlight and blend in to all of the products underneath. And just like the other side, I'm going to be taking the excess product up onto the brow bone. And last but not least, I'm going to take the tip, just run it right down the tip of the nose. Alright, and that's a highlighted nose, beach. Alright you guys, that is all of the products blended out on the face. Again, on the left side of the face we used the microfiber velvet sponge, the original blue one, and on the left side we used the microfiber rosé velvet sponge. Now I'm just going to go ahead and take a look at everything up close and see how everything is looking, see if I can see any differences between the two sides. Now after taking a little bit of time to investigate my face, I definitely feel like both the left side and the right side of my face honestly look exactly the same. Now of course the rosé sponge is claimed to be 30% softer, and I definitely feel that when blending out products on the skin. The other thing that I noticed was that the tip of the rosé sponge comes up to a finer point than the tip on the microfiber original velvet sponge. That really helped get into the crease of my inner corner and really blend out that concealer and blend out any of the fine lines under there as well. Now you can still do that with the original velvet sponge, however it is a lot harder to get the tip in there into that corner and blend everything out. So usually when I'm using the sponge, I usually have to go in with my ring finger and pat everything out. And now moving into the powder portion of the sponge, the only downside I had with blending out the products with the sponge was that it took a lot longer than blending them out with a brush. Now everything did blend out seamlessly and smoothly on the skin. I definitely love having both of the flat sides of the face to really carve everything out, as well as set the under eyes with powder as well. So the only negative I have for the powder portion is that it takes longer than just using a brush. Now with all of that being said, I definitely love both of these sponges. However, the rosé side definitely pulled a little bit further ahead than the regular side. For me, it just came down to the ability to really get into that inner corner crease and blend everything out flawlessly. Also really enjoy the bounciness of the rosé sponge over the original microfiber velvet sponge. Now if you already have a microfiber velvet sponge, I don't think it's so extravagant that you need to go out and buy the brand new rosé sponge. Now I still really enjoy my microfiber velvet sponge. However, after this video, I'm telling you the rosé sponge has definitely like taken my love. It's just those minor details that make this one better than the original. So yeah guys, that is it for today's video. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe down below. It'll help me out a lot. And yeah, I'll see you guys next week with another new video. Bye guys.